but this is just a really fitting song, and I really enjoy playing it now because the lyrics really seem to mean something. but this is just a really fitting song, and I really enjoy playing it now because the lyrics really seem to mean something. Right then, thank you very much.
Just one more song and I'll be there.
Thank you very much.
Boom. Here we go. Let me see how we're doing here. Just JP. Good to see you, buddy. I'm going to have the chat up on my phone. Hey, look at that. It works. It doesn't get drowned out by the thing. That's good. But look at the delay. Look at the delay, man. I'm talking to you, and my cameras are... Oh, there we go. Look, there we go. Right. Let's bring in the book. Obviously not a book, but I got my coffee. Have you got your coffee? Your beverage? Grab your beverage. And just one more thing. Hopefully you should be able to faintly hear the music. We've got bark again. I love this piece of music. Move that. Right, okay, here we go. Oceania. It has already been pointed out that megalithic monuments and irrigation systems are not found in every island of the Pacific. The original colonizers of Oceania brought with them their food plants and made habitable the islands where they lived. They therefore must have had some reason for settling in one place rather than another. But from the standpoint of natural conditions, it is hard to see what influenced them. What is the cause of the great activity around Tahiti, with the building of numerous pyramids, when the fertile soil of New Zealand lay ready for occupation, and was known in early days to the Polynesians? Why were the Paumotu more highly favoured than the Gilberts or the Ellis Islands? Why was Penrhyn Island chosen as a site for megaliths rather than the others in the vicinity? What is the difference between New Caledonia and New Zealand? What is the difference between New Caledonia and New Zealand that their cultural history should be so different? Sketch maps numbers 4, 5 and 6 show that the distribution of pearl shell agrees with that of the archaic civilization. The islanders have always been famous for their love of pearls and of pear shell. According to Jackson, in the Pacific Islands, pearls and pearl shell have been appropriate for centuries. Among the native ornaments noted by Captain Cook at Tahiti were feathers, shells and pearls, but the latter were worn, so he says, chiefly by the women. Can I have my music uninterrupted?
What's the easiest way to get in touch with nature? Do you just head
This is what happens when you record something, when you screen record it and you forget to cut out the adverts. I apologise for that. In the Marquesas Islands, plates of mother of pearl decorated the principal headdresses of the natives. While ornaments consisting chiefly of pearl shell were seen in Tubuai, Friendly Islands, Mangia Islands, New Caledonia, New Zealand, etc. The pearl shell was also found to be employed in the construction of fish hooks in many of the islands visited by early navigators. The shell from which the pearl fish hooks are made, Avicula cumingi, is rare in the Ellis Islands. It is universally used in the Pacific, and principally source of supply is the lagoon of Nakulilai. On the map are marked places where the pearls are or have been finished. The list of places where pearls are or have been fished The list of places where pearl fisheries are reported agrees with those of megalithic remains, irrigation, and other signs of the presence of the past archaic civilization. Hawaii, Oahu, Marquesas, Paumotus, Tabua, the Austral Islands, Cook Islands, Society Islands, especially Tahiti and the neighbouring islands, Raiatea, Penrhyn Island, Samoa, Tonga, especially Tonga Tabu, Fiji, New Zealand, New Caledonia, New Hebrides, Espiritu Santo, and Vinicolo being especially mentioned, Santa Cruz, that might be Tenerife, Santa Cruz, Tikopia, Solomons, British New Guinea, New Britain, Torres Straits, the Carolinas, Palau, Marianas, Marshalls, and the Lord Mulgrave and Gilbert Islands. The map shows the nature of the agreement between the two distributions. It's a lot of islands, man. Some of these words and names are really hard to pronounce, and I feel very stupid mispronouncing them. So I do apologise once again for any mispronunciation of any words. I trust that my levels are okay. I trust that it's all coming through alright. Oh, there we go. Loving the pronunciations. Thank you very much, JP. Nigel Betts, how you doing, mate? Good to see you. Just give me a thumbs up on the sound. Give me a big thumbs up on the sound as well. Some features of this distribution need notice. In the first place, I suggest that since the two distributions agree so closely, the first colonizers of the Pacific were led by their desire for pearls, and settled where they found banks of the shells that yielded them what they sought. The presence of the early folk is indicated by that of megalithic monuments, stone images, and irrigation systems. These are absent in those places where no pearls are reported. Since the latter groups are now inhabited, the inference is that the first colonizers of the Pacific avoided them because they contained no pearls, and not because climatic reasons prevented settlement. If the people of the archaic civilization in the Pacific were pearl fishers, their most important settlements would be in places where pearls were most abundant. Writers on the pearl fishing industry are unanimous on 2 points. Firstly, that pearl fishing is the chief industry of the Pacific, and secondly, that the Society Islands constitute the most important centre. In the words of Kuntz and Stevenson, gathering pearl shells and pearls is the principal industry of the semi-amphibious natives of the hundreds of palm-crowned and foam-girdled islands of the southern Pacific, commonly known as the South Sea Isles. Among these, the most prominent for pearl fishing are the Tuamotu Islands, or Low Archipelago, the Society Islands, the Marquesas, the Fiji Islands, Penrhyn, Tonga and New Caledonia. The most important centre of pearl fishing is that of the Society Islands and Paumotus. In the words of the same authors, Tahiti, the largest of the 7 Society Islands, is the centre of the pearling industry of French Oceania. It is situated in about latitude 17 degrees south and longitude 150 degrees west, and has an area of approximately 410 miles and a population of 11,000, nearly one half of whom live in Perpeti, the principal town. This is one of the most agreeable of the summer islands of Eden, nature furnishing food in abundance, and climate and social conditions requiring little in the way of dress and habitation. Notwithstanding its importance as the headquarters of the pearling industry, few pearl oysters are caught at Tahiti, most of them coming from the archipelagos of Tuamotu, Gambia, and occasionally Tubai. Tahiti, therefore, is the Eastern Pacific. Tahiti, therefore, is, for the Eastern Pacific, the centre to which pearls are brought. It is therefore significant that so many stone pyramids are to be found in the Society Islands, especially in the neighbourhood of Tahiti. In this respect, this group far excels the rest of Oceania, and in the past it is evident that Tahiti must have played a part of great importance in the history of the Eastern Pacific. That the region richest in megalithic remains should be also richest in pearls is presumptive evidence that the people who first settled in Polynesia were pearl fishers. Certain other facts about this. Penrhyn is mentioned as a place with notable megaliths. It is also an important pearl fishing centre. Again, the island of Tongatabu of the Tonga group is famous for the great trillathon. It is also specially mentioned as a pearl fishing centre. In Hawaii, the island of Oahu, where now is Honolulu, contains pearls. This island has played an important part in the history of the group. The Samoa group needs mention. When the migrations of the Polynesians are mentioned, it will be found that Samoa was a great hiving-off centre, whence the Society Islands, the Marquesas, Rarotonga, and other groups were colonised, an expedition even setting out thence at an early date for New Zealand. Samoa is mentioned by von Hessling as a pearl fishing centre, but it certainly is not important in that way today. The pearl beds must therefore soon have been exhausted. It is thus important to note that the megalithic remains of this group cannot in any way compare with those of Tahiti. The different degrees of richness in the pearl fisheries of the two groups serve to explain the difference. In the one case, there was every incentive to settle, and this incentive was lacking in the other. It must be noted too that the signs of the archaic civilization are practically confined to the small island of Tau in Manua, at the extreme end of the group. The unimportance of the pearls of New Zealand suggests the reason why the first expedition from Samoa did not lead to settlements of the same nature of those in Tahiti. Sorry, I just turned that down a bit. In one case, it is possible to suggest another motive. One important region for old remains in this Pelorus Sound. The Pelorus River itself is a golden river, the gravels of which have been worked for gold. Also, it is reported that Mahakipaka Bay, where a statuette of red material like pottery was found. Stone implements have actually been found in gold claims. At Bruce Bay, in a claim in the forest belt near the shore, on Argillaceous gravel. A party of miners consisting of S. Fidian, J. Sawyer and T. Harrison found a stone chisel and a sharpening stone lying close to each other. The former was broken, having been accidentally struck by the pick when the miners were loosening the wash dirt. The stone chisel is made of a dark greenish chert and is partly polished. The sharpening stone is made of a coarse, greyish sandstone, which I found in situ about 10 miles south of this locality, near the mouth of the river Piringa. Oh, you're going to come and bug me again? You've been out, you've done a poop, you've peed everywhere. What else do you want? What do you need? Why are you tapping around my feet? Do you just want cuddles? Is that all it is? You just want some attention? Eh? Eh? You just want some attention? Oh, you're hugging my arm? You bloody weirdo. Sorry, getting interrupted by the little Doberman that I've got here. Hust goes on to say that the beds through which the miners had been working were quite undisturbed, and some very large trees had been growing just above that portion of their claim, near the centre of which these stone implements had been found. Similar finds had been made in Wellington province in the drainage of swamps and construction of roads, often several feet below the surface. Others occasionally are found in Canterbury Plains, but all these implements are more or less polished and resemble in many respects those of the present native population. I wish to point out, however, says J. Hust, that although these tools are much more perfect than those found in the Moa ovens, I am not able to say which are of the greatest antiquity. It is therefore possible that the early newcomers of New Zealand, being of a higher civilization than those who followed, had some definite errand. Nothing can be argued definitely from the presence of one stone celt in a gold gravel, but the finding of an implement in such a position does at last raise the possibility that the goldfields of New Zealand were discovered, if not worked to any great extent, a long time ago. Another attraction can be suggested. The terraces and other pre-Maori remains of the Great Barrier Island show that some reason must have existed for settling in this particular spot, although the whole of New Zealand was open. The presence there of much obsidian suggests the cause. It has already been claimed that the domestic industries have had an influence upon the distribution of population in North America, as well as the more obtrusive occupants of the pearl fishing and gold mining. So, in the Pacific and elsewhere, the demand for homely materials such as obsidian may have played an important part in the determining of the distribution of population, although some more powerful motive must be assigned for the first colonization of the region. Oi. Can you just lay down, please? Do you have to go and pee on everything? I apologise to anybody that's just listening to this and not watching along, just listening to it in their earphones or something. My little Chihuahua / Doberman is being extremely annoying. Go on. Maybe he wants some food. Hang on 1 second. That's really funny. He wants Alfie's food. He doesn't want his food, he wants Alfie's food. It's the same food, but it doesn't matter. He wants it out of Alfie's bowl. He doesn't want Alfie to have it. And if Alfie goes and tries to eat out of his, oh, here we go, look. Cheers, Bernie. How you doing, buddy? Good to see you, mate. Right, I completely lost my place where I got to. So, I apologise. So in the Pacific and elsewhere, the demand for a homely material such as obsidian may have played an important part in the determining of the distribution of population, although some more powerful motive must be assigned for the first colonisation of the region. It is not suggested that the search for obsidian led men into the Pacific. But once there, they would seek obsidian for their knives because they were accustomed to it. They were accustomed to work it. It must be confessed, however, that the question of New Zealand cannot be decided on the present evidence. Nevertheless, the comparative lack of pearls in the sea around the island and in the rivers, together with the small degree of influence of the archaic civilization, support the general contention of this chapter, namely, that the search for pearls and gold led the people of the archaic civilization to colonize the Pacific. The region of Melanesia, from New Caledonia to New Britain, is a noteworthy centre of pearl fisheries, as is shown by sketch map numbers 5 and 6. But besides pearls, other substances could have attracted the men of the archaic civilization. In New Caledonia, gold exists in several localities, both in river gravels and in the rock. Moreover, this island contains jade and sandalwood, both of them much desired by the civilized people of Eastern Asia. Signs of the presence of metals exist in the Solomons. Tin has been found in San Cristobal and Bougainville. But doubtless, the pearls of this region would prove the greatest attraction to people from more highly civilized countries. The most important centres of the archaic civilization in Polynesia were those characterized by rich pearl fisheries. Evidence of the same nature exists in the New Hebrides. For those islands mentioned by rivers as being noteworthy for their megalithic remains, Santo, Malo, Malekula, Aurora, Santa Maria, are situated in the midst of a pearl fishing region that is especially mentioned by von Hessling. It seems certain that the earliest food-producing civilization in the British New Guinea was that of gold workers. Mr. Chinnery has shown that all the remains of antiquity of British and German New Guinea, which belonged to a time far beyond the recollection of the present populations, including stone pestles and mortars, stone carving, pottery fragments, shell ornaments, implements of ophicalcite, obsidian, quartz, stone circles and incised stones, have a distribution that indicates a wide movement that had a profound and far-reaching influence on the early developments of New Guinea peoples. What led the immigrants into the formidable regions of the interior in so many places? Nothing short of extreme pressure or the highest inducement could account for the presence of people in the very interior of this, one of the most inhospitable countries in the world.
Play videos in the background and watch uninterrupted. Try YouTube Premium on us.
What's the easiest way to get in touch with nature? Do you just head into the woods? Live off the land?
The existing races are there simply because they cannot help themselves. while the white race is attracted there by gold, we can reasonably assume from the evidence that the immigrants penetrated the interior at various points entirely of their own free will. Had they been searching for land, they would have surely remained in the fertile coastal region. What then did they discover? What then did they seek? He goes on to say that the objects have been discovered either in gold-bearing areas or in neighbouring coastal regions, and also that pearls certainly occur on the coast of New Guinea in every locality which has yielded traces of the immigrants. Also, some of the goldfields into which these objects have found their way lie among the mountains of the interior in the midst of the most impenetrable jungles, rough broken mountains, precipitous gorges, and dangerous rivers. These regions are inhabited by fierce mountain tribes of short peoples, all of which until recent years were at war with one another, as well as with their taller neighbours of the lowlands. Yet it is in such unhospitable regions that some of our objects have been discovered, many of them below the surface. The existing races are not able to account for them, so we are forced to conclude that they were part of a culture which has failed to survive. What induced the immigrants to penetrate the interior is, I think, strongly suggested by the pestles and mortars on their discovery in goldfields and on pearl beds. Many of them are eminently adapted for the purpose of crushing stone, and I feel strongly inclined to support the view expressed by the practical miners of the Yoda goldfield. The peculiar distribution of objects and the cultures I have associated with them, and also the general characteristics of the peoples of the interior, could have resulted from a series of prospecting expeditions into the interior by the immigrants and woolly-haired peoples of the lowlands. A similar process of cultural distribution and fusion is in fact in operation today as a result of the movements into the interior of white miners and their coastal labourers in search for gold. Mr. Chinnery has thus provided facts that are of extreme importance for the thesis I am sustaining. He makes it clear that the first food producers in British New Guinea were gold miners and pearl fishers who have left behind them traces of their presence in places where these things existed. His analysis of the culture of the peoples living in these regions shows what sort of cultural influence these old miners had. He is of the opinion that when these gold seekers arrived, they found only nomadic hunters of Negrito stock, and that they raised them in a cultural level so that they now practice irrigation. So, in yet another place, evidence has come to light to show the onward march of civilization in early times, exactly similar circumstances to those in which it is now once again moving up into the interior, namely, the search for gold. For long years, the Japanese have worked the pearl fisheries of the Torres Straits, thus showing that the eastern nations of thousands of years ago could have been quite capable of coming there on a similar errand. In the region of the Carolinas, much pearl fishery must have gone on in the past, and the Pulus and Laps and Yap are still important in that respect. The history of the Pacific, therefore, seems to have been one of colonization by a highly civilized people who used stone and practiced irrigation, desired pearls and pearl shell above all things that the islands produced, and made their permanent settlement in places where the supplies of pearls and pearl shell were most abundant. The Eastern Pacific, judging from the study of food plants, must have been uninhabited by man until the pearl fishers came in their boats, seeking here and there, testing every lagoon until they found what they desired. It is thus not remarkable that the Polynesians tell how their great hero Maui finished up the islands one after the other with his pearlfish hook. In all parts of the Pacific, this tale is told. And if the reason of their search was the pearl, if they actually made the islands inhabitable, its wide distribution is explained. It has an historical basis. Take a little pause there, jump into the chat room. Awesome, 3 of you left. 3 people, man. Never mind. I can't be bothered to make a video out of this. I'd rather just do it live, read it live, and then it goes straight up onto the YouTube server, and I don't have to store it on my server. I've got no storage space left, man. I need hard drives and external hard drives and stuff. It's good to see you're still here, JP. Right, Indonesia. In the megalithic culture of Indonesia, I argued that the search for valuable substances led the people out of the archaic civilization to the East Indian archipelago. The discussion in that book was confined to certain places. Now that the basis is widened, it is necessary to make a broad survey of the archipelago and to determine what was the most striking object that could have attracted the men of the archaic civilization. The study of these ancient Chinese records throws much light on the early civilization of the regions surrounding that country. The Dutch scholar Groeneveld published in 1877 extracts from the Chinese sources which throw a floodlight on the commercial relationships of the Eastern Indian archipelago just after the beginning of our era, and show that the natural products of that region were then being actively exploited. Indian merchants must have visited the archipelago long before that time, and the lure would be the gold. The lure would be the gold, tin, pearls, sandalwood, spices, and other treasures for which it is renowned. Since the two great peoples were exploiting this region, it is reasonable to conclude that others were on the same errand before them. For active trade has existed in the Indian Ocean from the beginning of the 4th millennium BC. Sketch map number 8 shows that the pearls form by far the most obtrusive possible cause of the settlements of the people of the archaic civilization. The settlement of Java certainly seems to have been due to their presence. This island contains little, if any, gold, but its shores are rich in pearls, and near Batavia, purple shells exist. It is therefore quite in keeping with what has been learned of America and the Pacific to find that the settlements of the archaic civilization in Indonesia agree so closely with the pearl beds. Other factors have helped to determine the choice of settlement. In central Celebes, a considerable amount of gold is washed from the gravels of the rivers, and here Crete tells me that the distribution of the remains of the archaic civilization agrees with that of the gold. In Timor, ancient copper mines have recently been discovered in places with ruins. In Sumatra, the earliest settlements, those of the people responsible for the stone images of the southwest, may have been the result of the search for gold. For there are some ancient mines in Rejang Lebong goldfield. The only one certainly known to merit the applications of modern methods. It is noteworthy that a Phoenician script is in use in the Rejang district. Not only were the people from India and westward exploiting the wealth of Indonesia at an early date, but the Chinese also took a hand in the game. In the southwest of Borneo, there are traces of very similar washings of alluvial gravels for gold and diamonds. These operations were being conducted by Chinese when Europeans first came to the country, and the extent of the old workings implied that they have been continued through many centuries. The Chinese also had a colony in North Borneo. It has already been seen that the Kayan have raised the nomadic food gatherers of the centre of Borneo to a higher cultural level, but, as is known, they were preceded at the centre of the island by Hindus, who left behind them carved stone bulls. These people were evidently on the same errand as the Chinese, for the image lies on the banks of the rivers in whose gravel there is gold. The Malay Peninsula contains numerous remains of antiquity, not in the form of temples, but of ancient mines. The technique which testifies to a high civilization. Many stone implements have been discovered in this region, for example in Perak. None of them, so far as I'm aware, are Paleolithic. They are all of polished stone. We are told that the multiplicity of the types of stone implements found in Perak shows that the users of them must have been comparatively in a high state of civilization. Further, that the people, whoever they were, who employed them were settlers from another locality who, on arrival, had reached the second stage of the Stone Age. A stone implement was found by a native 3 feet deep in the alluvial soil of a tin washing. In Pahang, there are remains of unknown strangers. One writer states that he found some stone implements in this state. The rudest implement was found by myself at the bottom of an alluvial gold mine in the Chu Valley in Pahang, and it had not been disturbed in its position when I had found it. It lay in a deposit of gravel or crystalline limestone rock, and over it had been a deposit of gravel and clay 43 foot thick. The implement must be of great antiquity. In this same region of the Tui Valley have been found some stone rings, whose use and markers are entirely unknown. Neither Malays nor Chinese in Pahang have any reasonable theory of the origin or possible use of these things, and it seems very improbable that the rings could have been made by either of these peoples. There are other signs of an alien people in this state. As Sir Hugh Clifford says, the recent discovery in the Malayan state of Pahang, the home of apes and ivory and peafowl, of immense gold mines of a very ancient date, and of a workmanship that has no counterpart in southeastern Asia, supplies ample reason for the designation of golden, so long applied to the Chersonese. Here, hidden away under the shade of the primeval forest, are excavations, which have yielded in their time tons of the precious metal. Of the race that worked them, of the slaves who toiled and suffered and died therein, we today possess no clue for this. The story of the earliest population of a portion of southeastern Asia is lost to us forever. Colonel Guerini, in his studies on Ptolemaic geography, has a fascinating note on the gold mines of the Malay Peninsula that I cannot resist in quoting in full. Gold, he says, is found in considerable quantities, either disseminated in quartz reefs or in alluvial deposits, especially about Gunung Ledang or Mount Ophir to the east of Malacca, where it was worked until 1817 by Malays on the upper waters of the Muar River and its tributary, the Gemenche, Chandras and other mines north-northeast of Malacca town. In Upper Perak, at Ayatawa, Basong, and exploring in Siam, we saw traces of ancient gold mines, gigantic workings, abandoned no man knows how long.
Crispin or crisp?
On the east coast of the Malay Peninsula, we need not mention its frequent occurrence in Pahang, on Lui, Lipi and Jelliai rivers, in Kelantan, Galas and Pargo rivers, and in Legay, Orangay, upper waters of the Tanjung Mas, and Tulubin and Tamau district. But it is of paramount importance for ethnological science to call to attention the fact that most of the gold mines now being developed in Pahang through European enterprise were originally opened at apparently a very remote age by men of an unknown race, whose workings, of which evident and innumerable traces still remain, have rightly been styled wonderful by the Europeans who first visited them. See Denny's Dictionary of British Malay. The chief of these formerly exploited mines are Raub, Punjum, Selensing, Tui and Kachau, the Selensing being one of the most marvellous. It is situated in a small valley surrounded by low hills, which in some forgotten period must have been the scene of very extensive mining operations. The surfaces of these hills are honeycombed with perpendicular shafts, circular in shape, which in some instances penetrate to the water level below the surface of the valley, a depth of considerably over 100 feet. Denny speaks of pits over 160 feet deep, extending for miles. Many of these pits are placed so close together that a wall of rock, not more than 2 feet thick, separates them from one another. The antiquity of these workings is attested by the apparently virgin forest which clothe the hills in which they are situated. Large, still-growing trees being in some instances found with their roots centred in the sides of the shafts. No clue has yet been obtained which might serve to indicate the race to which these miners belonged. The mode of mining employed by them differs radically from that in use among the Chinese, and the Malays possess no tradition on the subject. Whatever the race may have been, it is evident that it must have attained to a considerable degree of mechanical skill, and presumably to a fairly high degree of civilization. And yet, from an examination of the excavations, one is led to believe that the race which mined them must have been of a somewhat more diminutive stature than either the modern Malay or Siamese. From the appearance of many of these workings, it would seem that probably the work of mining was suspended suddenly and never resumed, possibly on the account of a war, an epidemic, or some other public calamity. H.C. Bellfield's Handbook of the Federated Malay States. As for myself, Guarini, I can add that traces of similar workings have been noticed not only in connection with gold, but also tin mines in various parts of the peninsula, Neolithic implements such as celts, axe heads, etc., being found in the ancient timbered drives or tunnels. This has been the case, for instance, in Perak. Since 1516, Barbosa speaks of a gold mine lying abandoned in Pahang. What therefore was the race that opened these mines? Evidently the same that built those wonderful monuments in Cambodia, the race of Fu Nan, still represented in the Malay Peninsula by the Sakai and allied tribes. However, this race, as in Cambodia, no doubt did only the manual labour. But the intelligent mind that planned, directed and superintended must have been, as there, Hindu. Or shall we have to assume that, in the case of the most ancient of these mines, where Neolithic implements occur associated with the workings, the directive mind was Phoenician? This is by no means improbable. Phoenician influence, once undoubtedly, as we have seen, extended as far as Sumatra and the Malay Peninsula. It is difficult to write about such happenings as these without spreading exclamation marks all over the page. To find immense workings dating from the unknown past in places which still recently have been the happy hunting grounds of nomadic hunters of the type of the Semang and Sakai is to experience a shock. It is to be hoped that the effects of this mental shock will be permanent. Apart from these nomadic peoples, aboriginal in nature, there are only in this region tribes of Malay origin, who cannot have been there for many centuries, certainly not by thousands of years, as long as the old workings. So once again, the first civilized people to arrive in the outlying region were evidently gold miners, who found themselves in a place tenanted only by nomadic hunters and food gatherers. These people were, as far as their mining activities were concerned, fully our equals, and their difficulties are realized. With regard to the rest of their material culture, it is hard to speak, for they evidently made no permanent settlements, but, like the Phoenicians in the districts of Sumatra, have left haphazard traces of their presence. These people evidently were not colonists, they were exploiters, simply bent on getting all the gold and tin that they could, and then departing. They were different from the Hindus who followed them and inspired civilizations in Cambodia, Java and elsewhere. They were the pioneers who spied out the land, and it was left for later comers to carry on the work if they could. Turning now to the coast of the district, it is noteworthy that the Mergui archipelago is important on account of its pearls, which are fished for by the Selung, a people who will play a part in the next chapter, for they speak the language of a family that has branches from India to Australia. Which brings us to India. India. An important contribution to the present discussion has been made by Major Munn, Inspector of Mines to the Nizam of Hyderabad, who in 1918 presented a paper to the Manchester Literary and Philosophical Society that will serve to lay the foundations of the study of the prehistoric archaeology of southern India. He claims, in that paper, that the dolmen builders of the Deccan were mining for gold, copper, iron and diamonds. He says that the two districts where the dolmens are thickest, Barari and Dawa, are riddled with their old workings for gold, copper and iron. In the Bellary district, 2,127 dolmens have been reported. He asserts that the area covered by the Darwar schists, not only in Hyderabad state, but from Sharapur in the north to the Wayanad in the extreme south of India, it is everywhere pitted with the remains of ancient gold mining, and, as far as I have personally seen in Hyderabad, around or in the vicinity of these workings, dolmens and circle cairns are to be found. And in Darwar and Bellary, even greater quantities are reported. In Hyderabad, the memory of these ancient mines is entirely lost, even in the folklore. It was, in fact, not until 1888 that these old gold mines were rediscovered, and the early efforts of the explorer were watched with intense ridicule by the local Brahmin, which never had any clear proof of the Sahib's madness. The difficulty which attended this prospecting was accentuated by the fact that all the workings had been completely filled up and practically obliterated by the so-called black cotton soil, an alluvial resulting from the decomposition of the Deccan trap, so that the surface indications were most deluding and consisted of typical auriferous blue quartz and the remains of old metallurgical appliances on the adjacent hard trapoid rock. Everywhere, cup-like hollows, undoubtedly nothing but small mortars, were found in the rocks where the gold quartz was pounded with stone pestles. And occasionally small crucibles have been found which, on crushing, gave an assay for gold. Whether the miners possessed the knowledge of amalgamation is a moot point. In the Hooty gold mines, discovered by Mr. F.W. Gray, we have the most extraordinary evidence of the skill of these ancient workers. There was little surface evidence at Hooty, a slight series of depressions, here and there a few splinters of quartz, which gave an assay, and the usual marks of crushing on the hard trapoid rocks near the Hooty Nulla. Cross-cutting exposed a long series of workings which were not bottomed by means of a small exploratory shaft. The company was formed and deeper mining on a larger scale was undertaken, but the first attempt failed to bottom the old workings. Finally, it was proved that the ancients had excavated all payable quartz to an unparalleled depth of 640 feet. Sufficient evidence was found to state that the quartz reef was extracted by fire setting, and after it was loosened, was gouged out by iron-shod wood levers. A great amount of timber had been employed. One piece might have been a windlass, and marks on the hanging wall suggested the ore was raised by means of ropes. It was probably water that finally stopped the old workings from going deeper, for at 640 feet a large quantity of broken chatties were found, which suggested heavy bailing. No such instance of perseverance and skill has, so far as I know, ever been discovered in the other ancient mining centres at Kolar, Wayanad, Darwar and Anantagiri. The development of the mine must have taken considerable period and employed a great number of people, not only in the actual mining, but in the crushing of the resulting ore.
Piano in 21 days is Ken Richard. At 61 years old, he didn't even know the 62 years old, expectedly, and she was April had.
As regards copper, the copper mining in Hyderabad state, in and around Chintrala, is certainly very early, and as I have already mentioned, so intimately associated with dolmen remains that even in 1908 I had connected the two things together and never found them apart. Major Munn makes some important remarks about the iron workings of the Deccan. Unless anyone has visited Hyderabad state, or in fact southern India, he cannot get even a slightest idea of the abundance, the extent, or the pureness of its iron cores. No section of the geological sequence exists in which iron does not occur. In the Archean, magnetite most frequently occurs in almost unparalleled magnitude, whole hills and ranges being formed of the purest varieties. Special iron and real hematite are also found. The schistose area contains interbedded layers of magnetite and hematite schists. The Purana group contain veins of limonite and bedded magnetite. Nearly every group of rocks in the Gondwana system, save the bottom glacial beds, contain one or more of the ores of iron in greater or lesser quantities. The disintegration of the Deccan traps supplies rich pockets of magnetic iron sand that glisten in the beds of every stream that traverses the area. Lastly, the laterite is noted for its richness in this metal. Each and all of these ores have been used for smelting iron by the natives. In this area, iron has been known from earliest times, and the unintentional manufacture of steel practiced. Major Munn contends that the use of iron was discovered in India by the builders of the megaliths. These people worked iron, so his contention is doubtless sound. From the days of the archaic civilization, the working of iron has doubtless surpassed in importance for that of other metals. The working of gold died out at a very early date in the Deccan, the old mines being abandoned, but the working of iron has persisted until this day among the natives. The examination of the Pueblo region of North America shows that modern people have constructed their railways through regions full of ruins, even in the case of branch lines. In India, the railways of Hyderabad and the country to the south seem to have been built to serve regions full of valuable raw materials such as gold, iron and copper. This is made clear by sketch map number 9. Doubtless economic motives induced Europeans to construct railways in some places rather than others. For instance, they would have made railways in Travancore to a greater extent if they had been needed for transportation of raw material. But that region is singularly deficient in minerals of all sorts, as is evident from a perusal of the work of Latouche. In more than one instance, branch lines run up into districts that possess signs of occupation in the days of the archaic civilization. Sketch map number 9 shows the railway system, the deposits of iron, gold, copper and so forth, and the distribution of settlements of the archaic civilization. If the reader will follow the course of the railways, he will notice the extent of the correspondence, which extends even to the cases of branches in Uttakamund, southward from Bellary to Kudliji, and from Bangalore to Mysore. These correspondences entirely support the contention of Major Munn that the builders of megaliths, and thus the people of the archaic civilization generally, settled in places where they found raw materials for their industries. In the beginning, it probably was the presence of pearls on the coast and gold in the interior that had attracted them. Once the use of iron was discovered, the course of events took another turn, and the native population took it up with avidity. The people of the archaic civilization made implements of polished stone, especially of trap rocks, diabase, diorite and so forth. This industry has evidently been responsible for one series of their settlements. That of Cathaywar, which are situated near a series of trap rocks that they particularly prized. This relationship can hardly be doubted. Bruce Foote was aware of it, for he says, "The extreme rarity of trap dykes in the south of the peninsula may have been a vera causa of the rarity of Neolithic remains in the regions of the South Calvary, while it is certain that in the northern parts of the Deccan Plateau, where Neolithic remains most abound, dykes of basaltic, dioritic and diabasic traps are very plentifully distributed. This has reference to their war implements, as their axes are, as a rule, almost without a single exception, made of the trapoid rocks, and especially of the finer grained varieties of these. A complete survey, therefore, of India will have to take into account the sources of the materials of which the polished stone implements were made." Bruce Foote gives evidence of the working of copper mines by the people of the archaic civilization. He speaks of pottery from an old copper mine on the left bank of the Krishna River, near the centre of the south to the north reach of the river, south of Muktiala in the Kisna district. The vessel was of polished earthenware, dark red in colour. With it were bowls and dishes of Iron Age type. This is proof that the builders of megaliths were working copper mines. Sketch map number 14 suggests that the communities interested in the getting of gold and the working of iron will be determined in their choice of situation by the presence of these. For the people of the archaic civilization have left their remains in regions where gold, copper and iron abound. The distribution of megalithic monuments in this region, whether the work of the people of the archaic civilization or of existing peoples, also supports the name thesis. For the great centres of dolmens are on the banks of the Subanrika River, the streak of gold, as its name states. In Assam, again, settlements of civilized people have been determined by the presence of desired substances, for the ruins of vanished civilizations mentioned by Colonel Shakespeare are close to railways and in districts producing gold and iron. This betrays the existence, in the minds of the former people, of needs similar to those of modern civilized men. The late Mr. Vincent Ball, in an article on the distribution of gold in India, says, "Gold washing, as practiced in India, affords an example, I believe, of human degradation. The colonies of washers, who are found plying their trade in most of the areas where, geologically speaking, the occurrence of gold is possible, must be regarded as the remnants of people possessing special knowledge. For although the former may have some acquaintance with the appearance of the rocks in the neighbourhood of which the gold occurs, so far as I could ascertain from close examination of the operations of 2 gold washers who were in my service for about 3 months, such acquainted, if possessed, is rarely availed of." Indeed, I doubt if they ever look upon the rocks as being really the source of whence the gold has been derived. They know of its occurrence in the sands and the alluvial soils, but whence it ultimately came from, they do not trouble to consider. But it cannot always have been so, for their earliest progenitors must have ascertained the existence of the gold by the application of experimental research in localities where, from theoretical considerations, they believed it to exist. It is scarcely possible that the non-gold producing areas in which the Deccan Trap, or basalt, and the rocks of the Vindhyan formation prevail, and which aggregate a total area of about 1/4 of the peninsula, were ever systematically prospected, and for this reason, if for no other, that the washers, if they were comparable to those of the present day, could not have devoted months and years to the exploration of, for them, barren tracts, simply for the fact that they could not subsist under such circumstances. By what means soever, they were led to select and settle in these gold-producing tracts. It is certain that within such limits a process of segregation has been going on toward the richest points. In a part of western Bengal, I've found that generations of washers had demarcated limits within which washing was remunerative, and these limits corresponded to a striking degree of well-defined boundaries between two formations, the metamorphic and submetamorphic. In the area occupied by the former, gold was not absent, but its abundance, as contrasted with that of the latter, I ascertained, by two independent methods of calculation, was in the proportion of 1 to 3. Hence, as the washers only managed to eke out a bare subsistence in the submetamorphic area, they confined their operations to it. These remarks of Mr. Vincent Ball show that the practice of gold washing inevitably tends to restrict the gold washers to certain geological formations. Sketch map number 15 shows the present-day distribution of the Gonds, themselves assiduous gold washers, and suggests that their movements have been influenced in the way stated by Mr. Ball. The presence of certain desires in the minds of men results in distinct geographical distribution which corresponds with certain geological formations. The distribution is the expression of desire. It has not given rise to it. For, as Mr. Ball insists, the practice of gold washing must have come down from days when men deliberately sought the gold in situ, and consequently tended to segregate in places with stores of gold. These remarks gain in significance when it is remembered that the Gonds still erect miniature dolmens, and thus showing strong signs of continuity with the people of the archaic civilization. If the Gonds, as gold washers, have segregated themselves on sources of gold, and perhaps iron, why should not the people of the archaic civilization also have done so? The case of the Gonds also shows that gold washing is carried on by people whose culture shows signs of direct influence of that of the archaic civilization. This is also the case with the Kurumbas, who, with the Moplas, are chief narrative gold workers of the Madras presidency. Their gold washing activities are supposed to date from 500 BC. During the inquiry carried out in 1831, Nicholson had discovered the remains of numerous old gold workings made by a mining people known as Karumbara along the outcrop of quartz reefs in the southeast Wayanad. The Kurumbas still erect dolmens, and to them are attributed those of southern India. The Qazi of Assam also, who are noted iron workers, erect many megalithic monuments, but this relationship does not hold throughout, for I know of nothing to connect the Moplas with the archaic civilization, nor the Jalgars, the gold washers of Bombay. The evidence in India bears out the contentions of Major Munn and myself that the people of the archaic civilization were engaged in exploiting the wealth of India, and that their settlements were distributed so as to be near the sources of supplies where gold and other precious substances and of humbler materials for everyday requirements. certain native tribes whose culture shows strong traces of the influence of the archaic civilization, have carried on the getting of gold, and have tended to segregate themselves on gold-bearing geological formations. It is not necessary to insist on the fact that the great civilizations of Egypt and Elam, the earliest known in the region under discussion, were engaged in exploiting various sources of wealth. The Egyptians were, at an early date, seeking copper and turquoise in Sinai, gold in Nubia, and sending out expeditions to the land of Punt for all manner of products. The significance of this fact will be pointed out in the chapter on Egypt. On the basis of this survey, I suggest that the process of settlement of these communities of the archaic civilization was purposive, that these people had desires that they sought to satisfy, even when it caused them much inconvenience. Such a conclusion, I am aware, runs counter to the doctrines of modern school of geographers, which lay such stress on climatic and other geographical conditions. My theory amounts to asserting that what is in the minds of men accounts more than anything else, and that if the desire be but strong enough, it will be satisfied, if that is humanly possible. This is in accordance, as I insisted in the beginning of this chapter, with what we know of ourselves and our fellows. Therefore, if anyone wishes to advance theories of climatic control and so forth, he will have to construct a better explanation of the distributions of the settlements than that which is now in possession of the reader. You still going? Hey, Mr. Perbs, how you doing, Perbs? If you're still here, I'll give you a wrench. Right, I'm just gonna grab my water. Hang on. These are long chapters. Nearly finished this one. Right to the boundary of the archaic civilization, and occasionally beyond it, traces exist of former mining activities. Beyond the boundaries are great stores of precious substances. Why did not the ancients exploit these stores that lay so close to hand? To answer this question, it is necessary to discover also why they did not finish their work in places such as California, Sumatra, Borneo, New Guinea, the Malay Peninsula, Hyderabad, and Chota Nagpur. The ancient minders abandoned works which were left for many centuries until the coming of the European. Evidently, something happened that stopped the mining activities of the ancients and prevented them from extending their operations. The story of this great catastrophe will be told in part in this book, but as yet the full extent of the tragedy is not known. When the world surveyed at the present time, in the places where in former days much activity must have existed, there are now only peoples of a low stage of culture entirely ignorant of the wealth that lays at their feet. Or if not ignorant, at least indifferent. As the story develops, it will be seen that the ancients did penetrate Australia, but apparently had to leave the country in a hurry before they had time to exploit its wealth. Something happened. perhaps an incursion of warlike people into British New Guinea, or some convulsion farther west, and they disappeared, so that all we know of them is derived from the Australians themselves. The traditions of the Australians tell of these strangers and of their influence upon the natives, whom they found wandering about the country in a state of extreme cultural degradation. When the archaic civilization broke up, as it will be seen later it did, not only were irrigation, stoneworking and image carving given up, but metalworking and mining were abandoned, and the land often given over to people who cared for none of these things. Whence came these barbarians? That story will be told, but it will be well to try to get another view of the archaic civilization before plunging deep into the description of its relationship to those that followed. I don't know about you, but I am actually really enjoying this. I'm really enjoying this book because it's what he's talking about. It's exactly what Jason Breshears said. It's exactly what Jason Breshears said. That he has noted how this ancient civilization has just disappeared, and it doesn't seem like it was destroyed or faded out. It just stopped, and then was all the mining just stopped. So what was it? What caused that? I'd be interested to hear what he says, if he's gonna, because I think what Jason was alluding to is that this guy has observed evidence of Phoenix events, or of a Phoenix event, a big Phoenix event that stopped everything. How long have I been going for? 1 hour. Well, I wonder how long. If this is a very long chapter, I might. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Six pages. Right, we'll take a break. Take a break, go to the toilet and stuff, and we'll be back.
Keep on, far
running through my veins, going to waste. Now I need to feel love, feel the love of joy. I cannot get enough. I just wanna feel love, feel the home that I live in. 'Cause I got so much love running through my veins, go to place. I just wanna feel real love, feel the love in the rapture. The whole of my soul, you can see it in my face. It's a real big place. Come on, hold my head. Why can't I go living? Not so I understand. It's who I've been given. Not sure I understand. Not sure I understand. Not sure I understand. Mr. Robbie Williams, here we go, thank you very much. Is that Phil Collins?
Yeah.
I've not done this one for a while. She goes out to the man on the street, so can help it. It's cold and nowhere to sleep. Is this somewhere you can tell me? He will talk, doesn't look back. He pretends he can't hear her. Starts to whistle as he crosses the street. He's embarrassed to be there. Oh, think twice, 'cause it's another day for you and me in paradise. Oh, think twice, it's just another day for you and me in paradise. She calls out to the man on the street. Can see she's been crying. She's got blisters on the soles of her feet. She can't walk, but she's trying. Oh, think twice. It's just another day for you and me in paradise. Oh, think twice. It's just another day for you and me in paradise. must be something you can say. You can tell from the lines on her face. You can see that she's been there. Probably been moved on from every place. 'Cause she didn't fit in there. Oh, think twice. It's lucky for you and me in paradise. Oh, think twice. 'Cause it's lucky for you, you and me in paradise. Just think about it. Think about it. It's just another day for you and me in paradise. Just another day for you and me in paradise. Paradise. Just think about it. Paradise. Just think about it. Paradise. Yeah, yeah, yeah. There we go, Mr. Phil Collins. Lovely. Well, I just want to do this one as well, if it's all right. It's not Phil Collins. But this is just a really fitting song, and I really enjoy playing it now because the lyrics really seem to mean something. Came in left me in the vacuum of my heart. What has happened to me? Crazy, some would say. Where's my friend? Where I need you most? Got away. I won't cry for yesterday. There's an ordinary world. Somehow I have to fight. As I try to make my way to the ordinary world, I will learn to survive. People's on the roadside, telling suffering grief. Feel today, forgot tomorrow. Deep beside the news of war around me. Ours is just a little soft talk.
No, 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 no. Sergeant Bun Bun, you alright there, mate? And Perbs, good man. Still there, listening to my dulcet tones. Right. We'll do this chapter and then and wrap it up. Polished stone implements. The discussion of the last chapter has introduced a complication. Traces of ancient gold mines have been found in places devoid of obvious remains of the archaic civilization, such as stonework, carved stone images, irrigation systems. In the Malay Peninsula are ancient gold mines whose workers have long since disappeared. In the Rejang district of Sumatra, some unknown people have been at work on the goldfields, and these people may be responsible for the stone images that are found in the southwest districts. In California, mines have been at work in places devoid of ruins. If the people of the archaic civilization were decided in their movements by the search for gold, pearls, etc., then we must try to account for such old workings as these. They may have been the work of some European people in the Middle Ages, say the Portuguese or the Dutch. On the other hand, they may have been the work of the first civilized people that came that way, and thus date back thousands of years to the days of the archaic civilization. If they are the work of people of the archaic civilization, then the possibility will have to be borne in mind that these people may have influenced native communities among whom they have left none of the cultural elements chosen out as indicative of their presence. If the study of some less obtrusive cultural element in those already chosen can show that the old gold miners of the Malay Peninsula and elsewhere can be included among the people of the archaic civilization, then it may be possible to link up other peoples, such as the Australians, with those already considered. The study of gold mines may show that the cultural elements chosen for discussion are not enough to afford more than a limited view of the activities of the people of the archaic civilization. It may be necessary to use some cultural elements of wider sweep than those already considered. Fortunately, such an element is at hand. To determine it, the account of the gold and tin workings of the Malay Peninsula is of crucial importance. For in these mines, as well as in the tin washings, polished stone implements have been discovered. And the same discovery has been made in British New Guinea and in North America. In India, hardly any doubt can be expressed regarding polished stone implements. They are invariably related to the archaic civilization, and their manufacture has long been abandoned. Their geographical distribution in India, Assam and Burma, as is shown by sketch map number 15, is such as to associate them with bygone mining activities. In Assam, they are found in the districts that produce gold, iron and other desired substances. In Burma, their distribution also suggests that their makers were intent on the search for gold and tin. In the Irrawaddy basin, they seem to be in direct relationship with gold washing. For in this stream, gold is said to be rare below chrome. So are polished stone implements. Such implements are also found in the tin producing regions of Burma. In Indonesia, as is shown by sketch map number 8, the distribution of polished stone implements agrees so closely with that of pearls and gold that little doubt can exist as to the extensions of their makers. It has already been seen that the gold and pearl localities were visited by the people of the archaic civilization. Since the makers of polished stone implements have visited the same localities and have long since vanished, they presumably must be equated to the people of the archaic civilization. Farther east, an interesting contrast exists between New Guinea and Australia. The polished stone implements of New Guinea are the work of the vanished gold miners and pearl fishers, and the existing natives know nothing of the use of such implements. The Australians make them today, although far below the natives of the British New Guinea in culture. They display an apparent close connection with the civilization of the old gold miners. This discussion brings us face to face with one of the most important problems of modern ethnology. The work of linguists. During the past 20 years or so, has revealed a family of languages spoken by peoples ranging from the Himalayas through further India and Indonesia right out into the Pacific, and including Australia. The Austronesian group of languages, as it is called, is spoken by the people of the Punjab, the Santal Parganas, Chota, Nagpur, Orissa, Chhattisgarh, and northeastern Madras in India, the languages of these people being termed Munda. It is spoken in Assam, in the Kari and Jaintia hills, the Burma by the Paleong, Wa and Mong or Tailing, in the Mergui archipelago by the Selung and the Nicobars, and in Indochina. It is spoken along the Mekong River and in Cambodia. The national languages, Khmer, belongs to it. The Semang and Sekai of the Malay Peninsula belong to this linguistic group. And finally, there are Malayo-Polynesian languages, and some of those Australian. Sorry, there was a really high-pitched sound coming from the speaker, and I had to just sort that out then, because that was giving me a headache. The cultures of people with Austronesian languages often possess palpable traces of contact with the archaic civilization. The Kazi of Assam still make megalithic monuments. They erect standing stones in memory of their men and dolmens for the women. The Mundas of Chota Nagpur are associated with the megalithic monuments. On the other hand, it must be remembered that not all the peoples of India who erect megaliths speak the languages of this family. The Kurumbas of North Arcot in Madras, who still make dolmens for their dead, speak a Dravidian language. The Polynesians, however, firmly erected megaliths, and their language is of this family. But many peoples speaking these languages show in their culture little or no obvious traces of contact with the archaic civilization. Such are the Sakai and the Semang from the Malay Peninsula, the Nicobarese and others. Much discussion has taken place as to how peoples with diverse cultural associations and of different physical types came to possess languages of a common family. The close association of the Mundas, Kazi and other with the archaic civilization suggests the cause of the linguistic unity. But from the point of view of megaliths, irrigation, pottery making and the carving of stone images, this hypothesis breaks down in the case of the peoples of the Malay Peninsula and the Australians, who have none of these things. It is at this point that polished stone implements come to the rescue. Sketch map number 15 shows that polished stone implements exist in places where the Austronesian languages are spoken. If the makers of these implements were gold miners, pearl divers and so on, who made settlements in certain places, these settlements being permanent or temporary, according to circumstances, if further they spoke Austronesian languages, or a language that gave rise to this group, then an explanation is forthcoming on the spread of this group of languages. This view has already been expressed. Archaeologists are of the opinion that the various stone implements which are found from the Chota Nagpur on the west to the Malayan Peninsula on the east are often so similar in kind that they appear to be the work of one and the same race. Attention has also been drawn to analogous customs found all over the area and to no other coincidences. Philological reasons can also be adduced to support the supposition of a common substratum in the population of parts of nearer India, farther India and elsewhere. The explanation of the phenomena would be that the original makers of the Celts spoke the language, and that wherever they went they imposed it on the natives. Who the Celt makers were in any particular instance does not matter at present. The essential point is that the establishment of the Austronesian languages and their association with the polished stone implements enables the student to form a mental picture of the original civilization of the past region, stretching from India to the farthest confines of the Pacific. Whether this civilization was carried by one race, or whether it was handed down from one people to another, need not concern us. In India, Farther India, the Malay Peninsula, and Indonesia, the making of polished stone implements is, generally speaking, a thing of the past. It is necessary to account for the disappearance of this craft after the major breakup of the archaic civilization. If the contentions of Mr. Munn be sound, the people of the archaic civilization discovered the workings of iron in India and transmitted this craft to the natives, which suggests that the natives have kept on that element of the culture of the archaic civilization and ignored the manufacture of stone implements, which is but natural, since ironworking would be far easier. Similarly, in Indonesia, peoples such as the Kayan of Borneo and the Toraja of Celebes have continued to work iron, but do not make stone implements. Although the continuity between past and present is broken, in the case of the manufacture of the implements, some valuable evidence is to be gathered from their present occurrence. In Borneo, the natives possess polished stone implements, which they hang up in the galleries of their longhouses. These axes were not made by them, and are regarded with superstitious awe. Mr. Ivor Evans found polished stone implements in the Tempasuk district of British North Borneo, all of which were got from the Bajor or Ilanun. In this part of Borneo, stone circles are found. Recent work by Heer Kruit has thrown more light on this subject, for he has found in Celebes and Sumba that the rulers preserved as their greatest treasures polished stone implements, or implements of bronze and copper of similar type that are no longer made, which have been handed down through the generations of their ancestors. From Timor eastward, a value is placed on old stone implements that the ancestors of the inhabitants brought with them from their homes in the west. In the Koloka region of Celebes, the chiefs, like those of Sumba, have implements that were given to their ancestors. Thus, although the manufacture of polished stone implements is no more in Indonesia, the implements themselves play an important part in the life of the present peoples. The distribution of polished stone implements in Java and the islands to the east helps to clear up difficulty encountered in the chapter on cultural sequences, that of the priority of the Hindu or the archaic civilization in Indonesia. Many polished stone implements have been found in Java, especially in the central and western parts. Since the whole island was formerly ruled by Hindus, who did not use the implements, it follows that the makers must have preceded them. Polished stone implements are found also in the islands east of Java, as far as Timor. That is to say, in the area which contains so many remains of the archaic civilization in the form of megaliths, irrigation systems, and metalworking. This region is full of pearl fisheries. Thus, in a region of Indonesia where Hindu influence is very strong, evidence exists of the priority of the makers of polished stone implements. The distinction between the people of New Guinea and those of Australia has already been noted. The implement makers of New Guinea, the gold hunters of the mountains, are gone, and the existing natives neither make nor use such implements. Over the boundary between food producers and food gatherers that runs through Torres Straits is a region where the implement-making industry is in full swing among people who do not practice agriculture, but some of whom speak Austronesian languages. Other evidence points to a connection between the old gold miners of New Guinea and the natives of Australia, for grinding stones are found in Australia. In northern Australia and Riverina, where stones are indeed a luxury, hundreds of square miles being devoid of stone, some fine specimens of grinding stones have been found, often 1 or more feet in length, usually of a close and hard-grained sandstone, and hollowed out by ages of use on one or both sides. These were undoubtedly carried hundreds of miles and were possessions of considerable value. The pounding stones, pestle-shaped, perfectly rounded, or with one flat surface, are usually of hard, smooth stone, such as quartz, diorite, dense basalt, or limestone. Some of these artifacts were found beneath the surface. Near Geelong, in the drift of an ancient watercourse on the Baraboo Hills, flints and water-worn gabbro axes were found. In the gravel of an old river drift near Barnon River, there were discovered a gabbro axe, weathered basalt wedges, and a grinding stone, the latter from an excavation made several feet near Barron River. Also, a few years ago, a flint axe of old workmanship was obtained many feet from the surface during the construction of a well near Lake Coonawarra. What is the explanation of these facts? If the presence of an Austronesian language in a country outside India, at least, is a sign of the influence of the archaic civilization, then it follows that the people of the archaic civilization must have visited Australia. Australia has much gold, and the implement makers would surely have wandered about in search of it, while their mines of British New Guinea were being worked. The working of polished stone implements has died out in so many places that the possession of the craft must argue for a close association with the people of the archaic civilization, or at least for a connection with them not interrupted by subsequent incursions of peoples with different cultures. It is well known that the subsequent history of New Guinea has been troublous. That of Australia must have proceeded uninterruptedly since the natives first made these implements. So if the Australians began to make implements under the influence of the men of the archaic civilization, their culture may possibly show signs of that influence, which would be absent among the peoples of India, Burma and Indonesia, except those speaking Austronesian languages. The making of polished stone implements has been, at one time, widespread in the Pacific, invariably in those places possessing direct traces of the archaic civilization. They are often dug up in islands where they are no longer made. Some, mentioned by Guppy in San Cristobal of the Solomons, are said by him to be of Paleolithic type, and of origin unknown to the natives. This is probably wrong, and they are more likely to be of Neolithic type, that is to say, made by people with a culture similar to that possessed by the makers of the polished stone Celts. In many places, the manufacture of stone implements, especially of jade, obsidian and so forth, was carried on in historic times, as for example in New Guinea, New Caledonia and so on. It is possible, even probable, that the people of the archaic civilization who visited New Zealand and also the Chatham Islands were attracted thither among other things by the presence of obsidian. A great trade formerly existed in the Pacific, in this stone being brought to the islands where it did not exist by expeditions that went to places such as New Caledonia to get supplies. It is easy to show that the use of obsidian by the Polynesians was not born of the presence of that stone, but was due to the fact that it was a custom derived from their ancestors. This is evident in the case of British New Guinea, where splendid implements of obsidian have been found that are not to the handiwork of the present-day peoples, but are the relics of some people of the past, evidently those of the archaic civilization. The obsidian is ready at hand for use, according to Professor Seligman, who says that small fragments are found mixed with the shingle on which are built the coastal villages of Bartle Bay. An indentation in the large hollow of the coast which faces the d'Entrecasteaux group and constitutes Goodenough Bay. These fragments were recently used for the scarification of medical purposes, and the block forms which they were struck were stated to have been brought from Goodenough Island for this purpose. But it was said that no larger fragments were in existence, that implements were never made of obsidian, and that no one had ever heard or thought of applying it to any use of this kind. At Wagga Wagga in Milne Bay, fragments of obsidian formerly used for bleeding and scarification, though less abundant, were not uncommon. And here they were said to have been obtained from a place called Hiliwau, described as near East Cape, where according to a somewhat doubtful statement, obsidian boulders were found in the jungle. But again, it was denied that implements of obsidian had ever been made either at Wagga Wagga or elsewhere. And the same was said at Tube Tube in the engineer group, where the fragments of obsidian used for medical scarification were formerly imported from Duau, the largest island of the d'Entrecasteaux group. Practically then, fragments of obsidian have been found wherever search has been made in the southeastern portion of British New Guinea and its archipelagos, but nowhere, as far as our present knowledge extends, is there any legend or trace of a belief that it was ever worked to form such implements as are shown in the accompanying plates. That is to say, people living in places where obsidian exists in a natural state, and where obsidian implements of unknown origin are found, are ignorant of the workings of obsidian for implements. This goes to show that the Australians must have been in contact with people who made obsidian knives, for they make in glass imitations of obsidian knives, so exact that some attention is necessary to distinguish them from the originals. If the argument is based upon the use of polished stone implements and obsidian knives, it would appear that the ancestors of the present-day Polynesians will have to be equated culturally to the ancient gold miners of British New Guinea, and to the hypothetical people who taught the ancestors of Australian tribes to make these objects. It is not meant by this that these various groups of people in possession of the archaic civilization were necessarily of the same race, but that they possessed cultures which, so far as the elements in question are concerned, were similar. In North America, the use of polished stone implements runs the whole gamut of culture, with the exception of the food gatherers and some of the Indians who went out into the plains of post-Columbian times to hunt buffalo. They occur in the earliest known settlements at Copan, one of the first, if not the first, of Maya cities. A number of small polished stone implements have been found, made of basalt, diorite and flint, slightly wedge-shaped, flattened with a cutting edge at one end and blunt nose on the other, in addition to rudely chipped implements which would have done for preliminary dressing of stone. The work of Moorhead on prehistoric implements shows how widespread was the manufacture of implements and of polished stone obsidian in North America among the food-producing, pottery-making peoples. These are so similar in form to those of the rest of the world that no distinction can be made between them. Attention has already been called to the fact that the peoples of Mexico and the surrounding lands, and those of the northern part of the continent, possess more than one cultural element in common, the fundamental element being that of maize growing. And use has been made of the common possession of these cultural elements to formulate a theory of development of civilization in that continent. The use of polished stone implements and of obsidian knives serves to bind together still closer the civilizations of the United States and those of Mexico and the Maya country. We may further say that it links together with the whole region from America westward. These results make it possible to predict what cultural resemblances should be expected between the various parts of the region: India, Egypt, Indonesia, New Guinea, Australia, Oceania, and North America. Egypt remained for thousands of years in possession of the fundamental elements of the archaic civilization, and in Nubia, polished stone implements were made for many centuries. In India, the earliest food producers who irrigated, constructed megaliths and worked metals also made polished stone implements, and thus will necessarily be nearer in culture to Egypt than their successors, who did not possess all these elements of culture. The Austronesian-speaking peoples who built megaliths would also be expected to approximate closest in culture of the existing peoples of India to Egypt. Farther east, in Indonesia, the conditions suggest a less close approximation to the archaic civilization. It would be expected that the existing peoples of New Guinea would be, in some respects, culturally more remote from the archaic civilization than the natives of Australia. The early Polynesians would be nearer in culture to the Australians and to the Egyptians than to their descendants in New Zealand, Hawaii, and elsewhere. The peoples of North America, from their long-continued manufacture of polished stone implements, should also betray closer cultural resemblances to ancient Egypt and the Australians than to later Polynesians, the present peoples of New Guinea and Indonesia, and later comers to India. That is to say, broadly speaking, the cultures of Egypt, of the megalith building stage in India, of the Australians, of the megalith building stage of the Polynesians, of the gold workers of New Guinea, and of the peoples of North America should be similar and should differ from the later comers in all parts of the region. Chapter 9, the succession of cultures. We will stop here with the reading. Just you two chatting, JP and Sergeant Bun Bun. We have only got 4 people in here. That's all right, because it's 4 of the best people. If you're sitting here listening to this book, it means that you are clearly an extremely intelligent, knowledge-seeking individual who requires, insists that his morphic field, informational field, is strengthened and expanded and broadened by further knowledge. And all this, what this guy's saying, it makes it just, I don't know, you can see it. I can see, I don't know how to explain it. While I'm reading it, it's playing out in my mind, and I can see it really clearly. But I can't put it into words. Can't tell you what I'm seeing. Anyways. Where's Leafy? Alright, I would go on to yeah, I would go to StreamYard and have guests, but I've only got like an hour left or something, so I'm not sure when it resets, but I'm just going to call it a day for now, and I'll be back maybe later today, maybe tomorrow. I haven't decided yet, but I'll be back. And until then, much love, peoples. I'll see you later.
The higher you build your barriers, the taller I become. The farther you take my rights away, the faster I will run. You can deny me, you can decide to turn your face away. No matter, 'cause there's something inside so strong. I know that I can make it, though you're doing me wrong, so wrong. You thought that my pride was gone. Oh no, something inside so strong. Oh, something inside so strong. The more you refuse to hear my voice, the louder I will sing. You hide behind walls of Jericho. Our lies will come tumbling. Deny my place and time. You squander wealth that's mine. My light will shine so brightly it will blind you. 'Cause there's something inside so strong, so strong. I know that I can make it, though you're doing me wrong, so wrong. You thought that my pride was gone. Oh no, there's something inside so strong. Oh, something inside so strong. Brothers and sisters, when they insist we're just not good enough, but we know better. Just look them in the eyes and say, we're gonna do it anyway. We're gonna do it anyway. Something inside so strong, and I know that I can make it, though you're doing me wrong, so wrong. You thought that my pride was gone. Oh no, there's something inside so strong. Oh, something inside so strong.